little tangled up here. When people look at me or look at you, what do they see? Do they see the color of our skin? Do they see our height, whether we're short or tall? Do they see our weight, whether we're slim or more round? Do they see our age, whether we're young or old? Do they see our social class, whether we appear to have money or we don't? Do they see our personality? Do they see our caring? Do they see the things that we're interested in or involved with? What do others see when they look at me or look at you? As you have been aware already this morning, and perhaps last Sunday if you were here as well, this month the United Church of Canada is observing or celebrating a Black History Month in Canada. This has the very positive implication for us of helping us to learn about those persons of color who have been an important part of our community of faith, who have played a prominent role in the life of our church, and in fact who have made us in part who and what we are. There is, of course, a negative implication that we draw from this observance or celebration, and that is simply the very fact that it is necessary. It is necessary to celebrate Black History Month because persons of color have often been forgotten, intentionally or otherwise, in our stories and memories of the telling of who we are. It is an unfortunate reality that in our church, as in society, it matters what is the color of your skin, just as it matters whether you are a man or a woman. Just as it matters what social class you come from. Just as it matters whether you are young or old. Just as many things matter, which are arbitrary and unfortunate ways that we as human beings have decided to draw lines between ourselves over things that do not matter to God, who has created us all and who has created us with the diversity such as we see among ourselves. In our reading from Paul's letter to the Galatians, chapter 3, offered by Dick so eloquently just a few moments ago, we heard the words of Paul to the Galatians. There is neither Jew nor Greek, there is neither slave nor free person, there is not male nor female, for all of you are one in the Messiah, Jesus. Those are words that are radical for us today. In Paul's world, they were absolutely unimaginable. What on earth could he have meant by saying them? Well, as Dick informed us just a few moments ago of Paul's intention in writing to the Galatians, we know that among the Galatian Christians, there was a debate going on about whether the followers of Jesus ought to observe Torah, the law of Moses. They had been Gentiles. They were not Jews. And there was the thinking among them that since they had come to be followers of the Jewish Messiah, they ought to become Jewish as the Messiah had been, that they ought to live the lifestyle of Judaism, that they ought to follow the laws and the commandments of Torah, the law of Moses. Now, Paul said that they ought not to. Now, Paul said that they ought not to, and not because Paul was offering them a shift in their perspective on right and wrong. Rather, Paul was drawing on his view of the world and of Torah, that its purpose was to create a boundary between the people of Israel and the rest of the nations, that is, the Gentiles. You see, the purpose of the law of Moses was to create a set of practices, to lead people in a lifestyle which would set them apart from all other peoples. And so that through their unique diet, eating kosher, through observance of Sabbath, a day of rest, through circumcision for the men, and through other aspects of the law, that Israel would be different and be set apart. And so that it would be evident that they were not like the rest of the nations, and that all the rest of the world could see that they were a different people, that they would see they were a people of God, and come to know God. Well, the proclamation of Paul and the apostles was that in Jesus, the Messiah, crucified and risen, the long-held hope of the Jews for the salvation of the entire world had come true. And because the salvation of the entire world had come true, it was no longer appropriate to draw this dividing line between Jews and Gentiles, because Gentiles were to be included among God's people. And so rather than being identified with the practices of the law, Paul instructed the Galatians that they were to be identified rather by Jesus and their faith in him. They were invited, therefore, to live in consistency with the death and the resurrection of the Messiah. That was a struggle for the Galatians. And in similar ways, it has and remains a struggle for us to include all people of faith within one family of God without arbitrary division of human, artificial distinctions. When I was growing up, I used to love a TV program called The Simpsons. It was a cartoon comedy. Some of you perhaps have seen it. Others of you perhaps have not. It told the story of a frankly dysfunctional family that lived in an imaginary place called Springfield. And whether at home or at school or at work, the members of this family, the Simpsons, were always getting into trouble. They never seemed to know how to do the right thing. In contrast to the Simpsons was their next-door neighbors, the Flanders. The Flanders were like fundamentalist Christians who got everything right. They were just about perfect. And in contrast to the misbehaving children of the Simpsons household were Rod and Todd Flanders, who spent their days singing the cheesy songs they learned at Bible camp. And in one particular episode, Rod and Todd Flanders were playing video games on the television. And they were using the technology which was current when I was younger. They had a game that had a little infrared gun that you would zap at the television screen. Now, when I was younger, the game was Duck Hunt, and you would use the little infrared beam to try and shoot the ducks flying through the air. Rod and Todd Flanders were playing a game where homeless and other marginalized persons were walking across the street. And you would zap them with the little ray gun in order to make them Christians. And instead of walking across the street hunching in their worn-out clothes, all of a sudden they stood upright. And they were dressed like I am dressed now, and they were carrying a briefcase. In one close call, one of the boys says, "Oh, look, I just nicked him and he became a Unitarian." We have imagined ourselves to be living and expressing a faith in God that often looks a particular way. It looks a particular social class. It sometimes looks a particular sex. It sometimes looks a particular skin color. It sometimes looks other particular things that we have dreamed up, things that don't matter to God. G.K. Chesterton, who was a popularizer of Christianity in the last century, who had a wonderful way with words, once wrote, "The Christian ideal has not been tried and found wanting. Rather, it has been found difficult and not tried." Paul has told us, just as he has told the Galatians, there is neither Jew nor Greek, there is neither slave nor free, there is neither male nor female, for all of you are one in the Messiah, Jesus. Not that there should not be Jew or Greek. Not that if we tried harder, there would not be slave or free. Not that if we were better people, there would be neither male nor female. He said, there is neither nor. For all of you are one in the Messiah, Jesus. He is declaring it to be so because God has made it so. And so we are invited to pray together and to hope in the grace of God that our lives and our life together would reflect God's intentions for us and for all humankind. That we would live consistent with the death and the resurrection of the Messiah. May we pray that by the grace of God, when people look at us And when we look at one another, sex would not be seen. Age would not be seen. Ability would not be seen. Social class would not be seen. Ethnic background and place of origin would not be seen. Skin color and many other things would not be seen. Rather, what would be seen is Jesus the Messiah and our faith in him. Amen.